Every year as October ends, something ancient awakens. Children dressed as monsters roam darkened streets. Carved pumpkins glow with flickering light. The living celebrate death itself. But this wasn't always innocent fun. What you know as Halloween was once a night when the barrier between worlds grew thin, when spirits walked among the living, when sacrifice was necessary to survive the coming darkness. The question is, what transformed a sacred Celtic ritual into a global phenomenon filled with vampires, zombies, and creatures from our darkest nightmares? The answer is darker than the costumes we wear. Before we descend into this mystery, join us on this journey into the shadows. Subscribe and share your own Halloween experiences in the comments below, because some stories are better discovered together. Now let us begin. 2,000 years ago, in the mist-covered hills of ancient Ireland, the Celts marked the end of their year with a festival unlike any celebration you've witnessed. They called it Samhain, pronounced Samhain. This was not a holiday, it was a threshold. October 31st marked the moment when summer died and winter's darkness claimed the land. The Celts believed that on this night, the veil separating the living from the dead became transparent. Imagine standing in a Celtic village as twilight falls. The harvest is ended. Winter approaches with the promise of hardship and death. Around you, druids in ceremonial robes light enormous bonfires that pierce the gathering darkness. The flames aren't for warmth, they're protection. Because tonight the dead return. The Celts didn't fear their ancestors, but they understood that when doorways open between worlds, not everything that crosses over is benevolent. Spirits wandered the earth. Some sought to possess the living. Others brought warnings. Many simply wanted what they could no longer have: warmth, food, life itself. To survive this night, the living had to become invisible. They extinguished hearth fires in their homes, plunging their villages into complete darkness. They dressed in animal skins and wore crude masks fashioned from bone and wood. If spirits saw humans, catastrophe could follow. But if they saw only other spirits, they might pass by harmlessly. This was the first Halloween costume, not entertainment, survival. The druids performed rituals throughout the night, interpreting signs in the flames, making prophecies about who would survive the winter. Animals were sacrificed. Sometimes the offerings were more substantial. Ancient texts remain carefully vague about what burned in those sacred fires. When morning came and the sun returned, villagers would relight their hearth fires from the communal bonfire, carrying the sacred flame back to their homes. The barrier between worlds sealed shut once more. For another year, death retreated to its proper realm. But empires rise. Religions spread, and ancient rituals transform into something unrecognizable. In 43 AD, Roman legions conquered Celtic territories. With them came new gods, new festivals, and a methodical campaign to absorb what they couldn't destroy. The Romans celebrated Feralia, a day in late October when they honored their dead. They also worshipped Pomona, goddess of fruit and trees, whose symbol was the apple. When Roman culture collided with Celtic tradition, these festivals merged with Samhain in ways still visible today. Why do we bob for apples on Halloween? A Roman goddess embedded in a Celtic ritual. Cultural conquest disguised as celebration. But the true transformation began in the 7th century, when Christianity swept across Europe with missionary zeal. The church faced a problem. Pagan festivals were deeply rooted in the lives of converted populations. People celebrated Samhain because their parents did, and their parents before them, stretching back into unrecorded time. You can't simply erase tradition, so the church did something brilliant and sinister. They didn't eliminate Samhain, they sanctified it. In 609 AD, Pope Boniface IV established All Martyrs' Day on May 13th. Later, Pope Gregory III expanded this to honor all saints and martyrs, moving the celebration to November 1st. By the 9th century, the Church designated November 2nd as All Souls' Day, a time to pray for the dead who hadn't yet reached heaven. 3 days focused on death and the afterlife. October 31st became All Hallows' Eve, the evening before the Holy Day. Hallows' Eve, Halloween. The timing wasn't coincidental. The church positioned its festivals directly over Samhain, attempting to Christianize what they could not eliminate. They replaced druids with priests. Bonfires for spirits became candles for saints. Offerings to appease the dead transformed into prayers for souls in purgatory. But here's what the church didn't anticipate. The old beliefs don't die. They hibernate. They hide in customs that seem innocent. They wait. Underneath the Christian veneer, Samhain continued to pulse like a heartbeat. People still believed the dead walked on October 31st. They still wore disguises. They still left food offerings outside their doors. Only now they called it honoring poor souls instead of appeasing spirits. Medieval Europe transformed Halloween into something darker still. As plagues swept through populations and death became humanity's most intimate companion, the festival evolved into a macabre dance between the living and what awaited them. Picture Europe during the 14th century. The Black Death has claimed 1/3 of the population. Bodies pile in streets. Entire villages stand empty. Death isn't an abstraction. It's the neighbor you buried yesterday and will likely join tomorrow. In this landscape of decay and desperation, Halloween became a night to mock what everyone feared most. The practice of souling emerged. The poor would go door to door on All Souls' Day, offering prayers for dead relatives in exchange for soul cakes, small pastries marked with crosses. Refuse them, and you risked your loved ones remaining trapped in purgatory. This wasn't charity. It was spiritual extortion. Children began joining these processions, wearing masks and costumes that grew increasingly grotesque. They weren't just seeking food anymore. They were performing plays, songs, and dances that mocked death itself. Because when death surrounds you, sometimes the only response is laughter. But something else was happening in Europe's shadows. Folk beliefs about witches, demons, and malevolent spirits intensified. The church's witch hunts would claim hundreds of thousands of lives over the coming centuries. And Halloween, with its association with darkness and the supernatural, became inextricably linked with these fears. Stories circulated of witches gathering on October 31st for their most powerful rituals, of demons manifesting more easily when the veil between worlds thinned, of creatures that were neither living nor dead prowling country roads. The vampire legends grew. The walking dead multiplied in folklore. Monsters emerged from Europe's collective nightmare, and Halloween became their festival. Then in the 19th century, something unexpected occurred. Millions of people carried these beliefs across an ocean to a land that would transform Halloween into something the Celts could never have imagined. America in the 1840s. Famine devastates Ireland. The potato blight kills crops and starves millions. Survivors flee across the Atlantic, bringing little more than memories and traditions. Among those memories, Samhain. Irish immigrants found an America already celebrating autumn harvest festivals, but nothing like the Halloween they remembered. They brought carved turnips with candles inside, lanterns to ward off evil spirits. In America, they discovered pumpkins larger and easier to carve. The jack-o'-lantern was born. But it wasn't just a decoration. The tradition came from an Irish legend about a man named Stingy Jack, who tricked the devil multiple times. When Jack died, heaven rejected him for his sins. Hell rejected him because the devil kept his bargain to never claim Jack's soul. Jack was condemned to wander the earth forever with only a carved turnip and burning coal to light his way. Every jack-o'-lantern is Stingy Jack, still wandering, still searching for a home in either heaven or hell. American Halloween remained relatively contained until the late 19th century. Communities held harvest parties, young people played divination games trying to glimpse their future spouses. It was quaint, almost innocent. Then urbanization changed everything. As cities grew and populations crowded together, Halloween night became chaotic. Teenagers and young men used the holiday as an excuse for vandalism. They overturned outhouses, broke windows, blocked roads with lumber and wagons. Pranks escalated into destruction. By the 1930s, Halloween had become so violent that some cities considered banning it entirely. Civic leaders needed a solution. They created trick-or-treating, not an ancient tradition, an invention, a way to occupy children and prevent destruction by giving them a sanctioned activity. Candy companies immediately recognized the opportunity. By the 1950s, Halloween had transformed from a night of chaos into an industry. But something else was happening in America's entertainment industry that would forever change what Halloween represented. Hollywood discovered monsters. Universal Pictures releases Dracula starring Bela Lugosi. Audiences are mesmerized by the pale aristocrat who drinks blood and commands the night. Later that same year, Frankenstein debuts, introducing the world to a monster assembled from corpses and animated by lightning. The timing was perfect. The Great Depression had Americans seeking escape. The darkness of economic collapse found its mirror in creatures who embodied humanity's deepest fears. Vampires, werewolves, mummies, invisible men, creatures from black lagoons. Universal created the template for Halloween as we know it today. These weren't folk creatures from peasant superstitions anymore. They were stars, icons, characters with backstories and motivations. Hollywood made monsters sympathetic even as they terrified us. We understood the lonely Frankenstein creature searching for acceptance. We pitied the wolfman cursed to transform against his will. The monsters became us, and Halloween became the night we could dress as the things we feared and the outcasts we sometimes felt ourselves to be. But the transformation wasn't complete yet. Television spread the monsters into every American home. In the 1960s, shows like The Munsters and The Addams Family made Halloween creatures into sitcom families. They were funny, relatable, almost normal despite their supernatural nature. Horror films intensified. In 1968, Night of the Living Dead introduced modern zombies, mindless corpses that consumed the living. These weren't the voodoo-controlled zombies of Haitian folklore. These were apocalyptic monsters, unstoppable and multiplying. The Walking Dead became Halloween's new icon. By the 1970s, Halloween had fractured into multiple celebrations. Children still trick-or-treated, but now teenagers and adults claimed the holiday too. Greenwich Village in New York began hosting massive Halloween parades. San Francisco's Castro district became famous for elaborate costume parties. Then in 1978, a film called Halloween was released. It followed a masked killer murdering teenagers on October 31st. The movie spawned countless imitators, establishing a genre where Halloween night itself became synonymous with slasher violence. The sacred night when Celts honored their dead had become the night when fictional maniacs hunted victims for entertainment. But we haven't reached the most disturbing part yet. Why did Halloween become the festival of monsters? Why vampires and zombies instead of harvest abundance? Why celebrate death and fear instead of life's continuation? The answer requires understanding what Halloween truly represents in modern culture. It's the one night when masks are mandatory instead of forbidden. Every other day of the year, society demands we present acceptable versions of ourselves. We hide our darkness, our fears, our fascination with mortality. We pretend we're not obsessed with what waits after death. Halloween removes that requirement. For one night, we can acknowledge the truth, that we're frightened animals living in temporary bodies, surrounded by violence and entropy, hurtling toward inevitable decay. We can dress as vampires, immortal predators who've escaped death, as zombies, the dead refusing to stay buried, as ghosts, consciousness surviving beyond flesh. We're not celebrating monsters. We're celebrating the possibility of escaping what terrifies us most, our mortality. Consider the trajectory. Samhain acknowledged death's power and sought to survive it through ritual and disguise. Medieval Halloween mocked death because plague made it too constant to endure seriously. Modern Halloween commercializes death, transforming terror into entertainment and existential dread into costume parties. But something darker pulses beneath the plastic fangs and fake blood. The monsters we choose reveal our deepest anxieties. 19th century vampires like Dracula embodied fears about foreign invasion and sexual transgression. Mid-20th century atomic monsters reflected nuclear anxiety. Zombies surged in popularity as global pandemics and social collapse became realistic threats. We dress as the things that might destroy us because it gives us the illusion of control. If I become the monster, perhaps the monster can't consume me. And every Halloween, the boundaries blur a little more. Today, Halloween generates over $10 billion annually in the United States alone. It's the second largest commercial holiday after Christmas. Adults spend more on costumes than children do. Horror films release strategically around October. Haunted attractions create elaborate theatrical experiences where people pay to be terrified. The celebration has spread globally to countries with no Celtic heritage whatsoever. Japan hosts massive Halloween celebrations in Tokyo. Mexico's Day of the Dead, while distinct, has merged with Halloween imagery in popular culture. European countries that once scorned the American commercialization have embraced costume parties and trick-or-treating. Halloween has become humanity's global festival of transformation. But here's what we don't discuss. Here's the part that should disturb you. Those ancient Celts who created Samhain believed the barrier between living and dead grew thin on October 31st. They took precautions. They showed respect. They understood they were engaging with forces beyond human control. We've kept their date. We've kept their practice of wearing disguises. We've kept the association with death and spirits and creatures that violate natural law. But we've removed the respect. We've made it ironic, commercial, safe. What if it never was safe? What if by keeping the ritual while removing the reverence, we've left ourselves exposed to precisely what the Celts feared? Every October 31st, hundreds of millions of people dress as the dead, as monsters, as things that shouldn't exist. We parade through streets in the darkness. We celebrate death and decay and supernatural power. We perform the ritual without knowing why it works or what it summons. The Celts wore masks to hide from spirits. We wear them to reveal ourselves. They sought invisibility. We seek attention. They understood they were negotiating with forces that could destroy them. We think we're playing. But rituals don't stop working just because you stop believing in them. So what happened? How did a Celtic ceremony to survive winter's darkness become a global celebration of Hollywood monsters? The answer is that it never stopped being what it always was. A night when we confront mortality. The forms changed, the symbols evolved. The Celts' literal spirits became Gothic literature's vampires, became Universal's movie monsters, became modern horror's zombies and killers. But the core remained unchanged. Halloween is the night we acknowledge death's reality and our fascination with transcending it. We dress as monsters because monsters cheat death. Vampires live forever. Zombies refuse to stay buried. Ghosts persist as pure consciousness. Werewolves transform and regenerate. These aren't random creatures. They're solutions to the only problem that ultimately matters. How do we survive what cannot be survived? Halloween evolved from pagan ritual to Christian holiday to secular celebration not through historical accident, but through psychological necessity. Humans require a designated time to externalize their terror, to make death tangible enough to confront, to transform existential dread into something we can dress up and parade through streets. The monsters aren't attacking us. They're protecting us from having to face the alternative. Our absolute powerlessness against time and entropy. And perhaps that's why Halloween has spread so successfully across cultures. Not because of corporate marketing or Hollywood influence, though both played roles, but because modern humans face the same existential crisis the Celts did 2,000 years ago. We know winter's coming. We know the harvest ends. We know death waits regardless of science or technology or medical advancement. So for one night, we become the things that defeat death. We wear their faces, we embody their power. We pretend just for a few hours that mortality isn't absolute. The Celts would understand this perfectly. They dressed as spirits not to mock death, but to negotiate with it. We do the same. The costumes changed, but the ritual continues generation after generation because the need it fulfills remains constant. Halloween isn't about candy or parties or even monsters. It's humanity's annual reminder that we're not in control. That darkness exists, that death approaches, and that sometimes the only response is to dress up in death's costume and dance until sunrise breaks the spell. When the last Halloween decoration comes down in early November, when costumes return to closets and store shelves fill with Christmas merchandise, We convince ourselves it was all just fun. Children playing dress-up, adults enjoying nostalgia, a harmless celebration of autumn and imagination. But those Celtic bonfires still burn in human consciousness. Those spirits the Druids warned about never stopped walking. We simply gave them new names and pretended they were fictional. Samhain endures because it expresses something true about human existence. We are temporary creatures haunted by awareness of our own ending, living in a world that offers no escape from mortality. One night a year, we're permitted to acknowledge this openly. The rest of the year, we look away. So as you celebrate next Halloween, as you don costume and venture into October darkness, as you carve pumpkins and distribute candy to small ghosts and vampires and zombies, remember what you're really doing. You're participating in humanity's oldest ritual. You're joining an unbroken chain stretching back millennia. You're doing what your ancestors did in ancient Celtic villages and medieval European towns and Depression-era American cities. You're negotiating with death itself. And the question you should be asking, the question that should wake you at 3 in the morning as October 31st approaches, is this: what if death is negotiating back? Some rituals survive because they serve purposes we've forgotten. Some masks hide truths we're not ready to see. Some nights are darker than others for reasons that have nothing to do with the position of the sun. And some questions should remain unanswered. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and remember, the shadows have always been watching back.